I've got a new class coming up in January called Mabinogi Connections. It's been quite a while since I taught a class on the four branches of the Mabinogi, and I'm looking forward to getting back into it. Those stories are a core part of who I am and how I think about mythology. There are a few Mabinogi courses around these days, so is mine better? Actually, I think every teacher has their strengths and their interests and their own way of doing things. So rather than try and present my class as the best, I'll just tell you what I'm planning, and then you'll know whether it might be a good fit for you. Increasingly, I've come to see all of Celtic mythology as a network, like a map with lots of interesting paths connecting various points. A story from the Mabinogi might have one path leading off to a Welsh triad and another connecting it to a story from Ireland, maybe one leading to some interesting early poetry. Comparisons with Irish stories are particularly interesting. Wales had a lot of Irish settlement in the course of the early medieval period, which likely contributed to that. At the same time, based on their shared linguistic heritage, Ireland and Wales no doubt have a shared mythological heritage somewhere in the distant past. We don't necessarily have to solve the question of how the stories came to be so similar, and yet so uniquely Irish or uniquely Welsh, in order to explore and enjoy them jointly. If this sounds intriguing or even exciting, then Mabinogi Connections is likely to be a good fit for you. But if you're a complete beginner to both Welsh and Irish mythology, it might not be the best fit. My Introduction to Celtic Mythology class, which will start in February, might really be a better class to get you on solid ground. Mabinogi Connections could be the perfect class for you if you already have some experience with either the Welsh or the Irish material, maybe even both, and if you're curious about how they connect and complement each other. Over the years, I've certainly found that this kind of comparative work has deepened my understanding of stories that are very close to my heart. I know that I can come across as a bit academic and no nonsense about things, and I am, but these stories and this kind of work is really heart work for me. There won't be a lot of assigned reading for this class. I will ask you to read through the Mabinogi before the class starts, if you possibly can. The four branches of the Mabinogi is only about 60 pages of a small-sized paperback, and it's also available online, so that's not a burdensome amount of reading. And then we'll study it again, bit by bit, over the course of the class, and I hope you'll read each section again as we go along. So the course will be centered on the four branches. The other material that I bring in will be introduced in the weekly sessions, and I'll provide notes with references, often internet links, that will allow you to read as much of the extra material as you wish. Mabinogi Connections starts on 10th January and will meet on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. UK time for a total of 12 sessions. I'd love to welcome you to the class. Welcome to the 12 Days of Celtic Mythology. Today is the 6th day of Season 4. And I'm continuing to look at your answers every day for the challenge. So I just want to clarify one or two things. So I really do have a spreadsheet. Obviously, I've blurred out your username here. Each day when I upload the video for that day, I go back and I look at the answers from the previous day. And that should give you at least 24 hours to get your answer up. So the little Y's stand for yes. I don't know why I picked that, but I did. That means that you answered the question, you had an answer, and it was okay. There's a few question marks in there, and that might be an answer that's not quite complete or a little bit wrong or something. So I'm really not very picky at all, but these little queries might be important when I'm figuring out who's won and who hasn't at the end. And a blank space means that I didn't find an answer for you that day, so you've had 24 hours. And I do suggest that you check that your answer is really showing up on the comments. You know, YouTube's a big platform, and I'm sure things could fall through the cracks. Sometimes I pin that comment talking about my my classes that are coming up, and later it's not pinned. So I don't know what's going on. So if people have a couple of blank spaces because they've missed a couple of days, then I just eliminate those people. So there used to be a few more people than this on the list. But right now we have 12 people who are absolutely perfect. We'll see how we go at the end. So I hope you're reading each other's comments on the opinion type questions. Let other people know if you think they've got a good answer or if you don't understand their answer. Get a bit of a conversation going. Make this a nice opportunity to talk about Celtic mythology. So you might have noticed also that there are people in the comments section that I know. And I'm just trying to be really transparent about that. Some people who have taken some of my classes are definitely in there, and if they happen to post something I'm curious about, I might ask them to email me, but they don't have any greater chance of completing the challenge than anyone else, except they might be a bit more clued up. But most of the questions aren't really aimed at people who know a lot. In fact, I seem to have quite a lot of students doing the challenge this year. And I really hope that the challenge will allow some new people to try my classes as well. So when I come to the end, I'm going to make sure it's not too heavily weighted to my own students. So to start off today, let's look at some more animals. So there's a hare in one of today's stories. Although hares are bigger than rabbits, I know they look a bit like rabbits, but they're much different than wild rabbits. They don't live in underground burrows, and hares have a very special place in folklore as an animal associated with witches, among other things. Witches were often said to take the form of hares for various reasons. There's a lot of folklore about hares and very little about rabbits. In North America, we call hares jackrabbits, and they're also very different from our own small rabbits like the cottontail. And in Britain, people sometimes chase hares with greyhounds or lurchers. They mainly do this to bet on the performance of the dogs. Most of the hares escape, but this sport is illegal, by the way. We're also going to meet an otter, just briefly. What can I say? This is an otter. It eats fish. That's what it looks like. So I'm going to tell a longer story later today, but I want to look at a very short one. And I think we'll just read it from John Carey's translation. So this is yet another Fenian story called The Boyhood Deeds of Finn. So he's not the famous Finn McCool yet, and he sometimes still uses his childhood name of Devnia. And the Fianna are supposed to be poets as well as warriors. So Finn has been studying poetry as we join the story. Finn said farewell to Cruel and went on to study poetry with Finechis, who dwelt beside the Boyne. Finechis had spent 7 years beside the Boyne, waiting for the salmon of Linfake, for it had been prophesied to him that he would consume the salmon of Fake. So Lin means like a pool, right, or a lake. So the salmon of Linfake. And so he had been told that he was going to consume the salmon, and that after that there would be nothing which he did not know. Think about that. The salmon was caught and was entrusted to Devnia to cook, and the poet told him not to eat any of it. The lad brought the salmon to him after he had cooked it. "Did you eat any of the salmon, lad?" said the poet. "No," said the lad, "but I burnt my thumb, and I put it in my mouth after that." "What is your name, lad?" he said. "Devnia," said the lad. "Finn is your name, lad," he said, "and it is you who are destined to eat the salmon. Truly, you are the fair one." In other words, Finn means fair. The lad ate the salmon after that. This is what gave the knowledge to Finn. Whenever he put his thumb in his mouth, what he did not know would be revealed to him. It is then that Finn composed this poem, giving proof of his poetic knowledge. Now, John Carey didn't translate the poem, so we'll read a little bit of Kuno-Meyer's translation. May Day, season surpassing, splendid is color then. Blackbirds sing a full lay. A lay is like a poetic song. If there be a slender shaft of day. The dust-colored cuckoo calls aloud, welcome, splendid summer. The bitterness of bad weather is past. The boughs of the wood are a thicket. Summer cuts the river down, the swift herd of horses seeks the pool. The long hair of heather is outspread, the soft white bog down grows, so there's this cottony looking grass that grows in the moorlands. Panic startles the heart of the deer, the smooth sea runs apace. Season when ocean sinks asleep, blossom covers the world. Bees with puny strength carry a goodly burden, the harvest of blossoms. Up the mountainside, kine, that means cattle, kine take with them mud. The ant makes a rich meal. The harp of the forest sounds music. The sail gathers perfect peace. Color has settled on every height, haze on the lake of full waters. The poem is quite a bit longer than this, but you get the idea. It's a beautiful, lush description of nature. So another salmon gets eaten, but the result is a bit different than it is in the Tuan Macarroll story. Or is it? So let's move on to another story now, the real story for today. During the reign of Arthur, on a lake called Llyn Tegid, that's in Wales, there lived a woman called Ceridwen, and she was the wife of Tegid Foel, and they had 2 children, a very beautiful daughter and a very ugly son. And the son was called Morvran, but he was so hideously ugly that they came to call him Avagdi, or utter darkness. And Ceridwen thought that if Morvran could have the gift of wisdom and poetry, he might still be accepted in society. She studied in a great book of spells and magic and set out to make a very complex potion in a huge cauldron. The herbs for this had to be gathered according to the movements of the stars and the planets at specific times of day and night. The cauldron was to brew for an entire year. So she got an old blind man to constantly stoke the fire, and a young boy, a yeoman's son, called Gwion Bach, to stir the cauldron. All the while she gathered the herbs with the intention that when the potion was finished, just 3 drops of it would impart the necessary knowledge and awen. The rest would be poison to anyone who drank it. So the blind man, Morda, stoked the fire, and little Gwion stirred and stirred. But as she gathered herbs one day, toward the end of the year, 3 drops flew out onto Gwion's hand. He instinctively put the burned part in his mouth, and everything changed in an instant. Cauldron split in 2. The rest of the liquid spilled into a stream, poisoning the water. When the horses of Gwyddno Garanhir came to drink, they were all poisoned. In a flash, Gwion was filled with all knowledge and wisdom, and the first thing he knew was that Ceridwen would come after him. He saw her fly into a rage and beat the innocent blind man, and then come running toward him, and he changed himself into a hare and tried to get away as fast as he could. But Ceridwen became a greyhound and turned him. He leapt into the water then and became a salmon. He tried to swim away under the surface of the river, but Ceridwen pursued him as an otter. So Gwion flew up into the air as a little bird, but she immediately became a hawk and flew at him. Then, from the air, he saw a pile of wheat lying on a threshing floor. So Gwion turned himself into a grain of wheat, indistinguishable from all the others. Now, Ceridwen became a black-crested hen and pecked and scratched at the grain until she finally consumed him. But now, Ceridwen found herself to be pregnant. In time, she gave birth to a male child. She had planned to kill the child, but she couldn't do it. So she sewed him up in a leather bag and threw him into the sea to take his chances. In time, the son of Gwyddno Garanhir, of the poisoned horses, who was called Elfin, went to a certain salmon weir to collect the salmon that were found there each year in large numbers. It was the only gift his father could give him for wealth, since Elphin had already squandered his inheritance. However, Elphin found no salmon, only this leather bag bobbing around in the water. Well, he got the bag to shore and ordered it to be cut open, and inside it was a babe. The brow of the child was shining and beautiful, and the servant exclaimed, "What a radiant brow!" which is the meaning of Taliesin, radiant brow or shining brow. The child immediately began declaiming wonderful poetry. "Elphin, cease your weeping, let none revile his own. Never was caught in Gwyddno's weir a fair catch as tonight. Although I am small and frail, I shall ease your grief better than 60 young salmon." Elphin took the boy home, and Gwyddno asked who or what he was, a man or a spirit, and the boy began to speak in this way. But let's look at the words Taliesin speaks as we hear them. "I am general chief bard to Elphin, and my native place is the land of cherubim. The prophet John calls me Myrddin. Now every king calls me Taliesin. I was with my Lord in the highest heaven, when Lucifer fell into deepest hell. I was in a banner before Alexander. I know the names of the stars, from north to south. I was in the fortress of Gwydion with Tetragrammaton, which essentially means God. I brought the seeds to the earth in the vale of Hebron. I was in Canaan when Absalom was slain. I was in the court of Dawn before the birth of Gwydion. I was prophet to Elijah and Enoch. I was on the wood of the cross with the merciful Son of God. I was 3 sojourns in the prison of Arianrhod. I was chief supervisor on the work of Nimrod's tower. I was with my Lord in the manger of the ox. I gave strength to Moses in the waters of Jordan. I was in the sky with Mary Magdalene. I received Awen from the cauldron of Caridwen. I was teacher to the whole universe. I shall be on the face of the earth until doomsday. I was indeed 9 months in the belly of Caridwen the witch. I was formerly Gwion Bach. From now on, I shall be Taliesin." So here's today's question. Why does poetry figure so heavily in these stories? You might need to try to get inside the mind of medieval Welsh and Irish culture to fully understand that, but I think your intuition can take you most of the way if you give it some thought. What might poetry and salmon and shape-shifting have to do with each other? There is a question. I'm really looking forward to reading your answers on this one, because you're going to have to just dig deep in yourself, I think, to answer this. So I took my telling of this story, the Hannes Taliesin, and the translated poetry from Frank Olding's Taliesin source book. There are some really terrible old translations of Taliesin on the internet and in cheap reprints, and some of the good translations are pretty expensive. If you want to start studying both the story about Taliesin, like the one I've just been telling you, which is much longer, and the poetry of Taliesin and written in the name of Taliesin, this book is very good, and it's not terribly expensive. So that's it for today, and who knows what animals will wander in for tomorrow's story. Bye-bye for now.